winds blow, and the deep snows fall on the forest. For northern man, winter is no longer a test of survival, but a time to enjoy frozen beauty in the wilderness. Come with us now as we follow John and Janet Foster through winter and spring in the wild country. This is one of the great national parks of the world, Jasper, in the heart of the Canadian Rockies. 4,200 square miles of great open spaces. And if, like John and Janet Foster, you specialize in wildlife photography, the time of the snow comes as a special paradise. Until recently, only a few favored areas of Jasper have been used by the public in winter. Sheltered basins adapted to the special needs of the downhill skier. Now, all that is changing, thanks to the resurgence of cross-country skiing and the rediscovery of the snowshoe. And in January, no place on earth could be more enticing than the western country of the big mammals. Cervus canadensis, more commonly known as elk, or the more satisfying and correct Indian name, wapiti. In deep winter, they come down into the valleys, closer to the grasslands and the low-hanging branches of the trees. They have no fear of hunters' guns, because in the park, there aren't any. You could do this on cross-country skis, and an ever-increasing number of people make the effort. Jasper Park is 130 miles long, virtually without a fence. But when you get off the beaten trails and your hands are busy with cameras, only the snowshoe can carry you through a tangle of underbrush and fallen trees in any snow conditions. The wilderness in winter. Approach it with a sense of wonder, or to echo the sentiment of a wise park planner, take nothing but pictures, leave nothing but footprints, and develop a healthy respect for other tracks that may cross your own. Walk softly, secure in the trust that develops between animal and man in a national park. And the reward may be this: a wild mule deer, almost within touching distance.
The Rocky Mountain bighorn sheep are easy to find in the winter. They're down in the valleys where there's less snow, and they can find the dried grasses of summer. But down here they also find their natural enemies, the timber wolves and cougar. And so for the winter visitor, there's really an abundance of wildlife in the valleys.
With their magnificent head, they've been a favorite trophy since the opening of the West. And without these great mountain parks, their numbers would have dwindled away. Even today, trophy hunters offer thousands of dollars to the guide who can lead them to the biggest ram. That's a lamb learning to survive in winter.
If there is one thing that nature never forgives in man, it is innocence. In avalanche country, there's no point in claiming that you just didn't know after they dig you out, if they dig you out. In the more developed areas of the western parks, you're protected against the major hazards by a sophisticated system of avalanche control, centered around towers like this one, near Jasper's Marmot ski basin. The avalanche gun is powered by nitrogen gas and fires an explosive projectile to an exact spot on a threatening slope.
Ready? Fire.
Down in the ski lounges, thrilling tales are told of narrow escapes and of actually skiing the crests of small slides. But up here, the humor is restrained. The men in charge are park wardens, and they've seen the other face of the jokes, the times when the skier didn't make it.
The wardens know every sensitive area, and they try to keep the snow cleaned off. However, on a cold day like this, the snow is very hard to move. But if it warms up, then it all becomes very unstable, and the avalanche hazard increases.
These park wardens are a very special breed of men. Tough, experienced, and above all, trained.
What was that, the one? 160.
160.
160, yeah. 260 we go with that.
You were scared, Willie.
Okay, the igniter is in.
Igniter, cap, spacer, plate.
It comes out. Ready? Still.
There's another side to avalanche control, the sometimes grim business of picking up after one to see what may lie underneath. You leave your vantage point on the control tower and head down toward another group of men. Men rehearsing for a drama they pray will never take place.
They stamp out a safety path beside the probe line. This is a fast escape route through the deep snow in case of a second avalanche. And always they must obey the safety man. He never takes his eyes off the slope above, because there's always danger of a second slide.
Up probe.
It's a military-style operation conducted on the count. Sometimes it goes on like this for hours, although 1 hour under the surface is the average survival time.
Step ahead. Down probe.
And after each advance of the line of probes, the area is marked with a red spray, assurance that no square foot will be left uncovered.
Come here.
And if you are buried by an avalanche, you have to be found quickly. And dogs have made some really dramatic rescues. These are highly trained, disciplined dogs who belong to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and the National Park Service. The wardens had buried a few packs around here for the dogs to find, and they also buried a warden.
Neither the dog nor his trainer knew the exact location of the buried man.
Ginger, come on. Search him up. Search him up. Where's he at? Ginger. Attaboy, let's get him out there. Attaboy, let's get him out of there. Attaboy, let's get him out. Attaboy, dig him out.
A happy moment, especially for Ginger. These dogs enjoy success, and this is really a most important part of their training. It's the reward after the search.
The warden was under the snow for about 20 minutes, long enough to get darn good and cold.
Who's this? Stuart Fox?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
That's great. The dog greets you so warmly. It's really wonderful.
What kind of reward does he get for that?
We'll just get petted and made a bustle.
There is an all-weather road which runs from Jasper down through the ice fields to another great park at Banff. And this helicopter is sitting squarely in the middle of that road. Like some of the nearby ski slopes, the Banff-Jasper highway is subject to frequent snowslides. Slides of sufficient force to bury any car that might be in the way.
That's difficult flying among those mountains in a blinding snowstorm. They're dropping charges into areas where the fresh snow is building up. In this case, you might say the ounce of prevention is several pounds of dynamite.
Bombs in a peaceful snowstorm? A matter of some confusion to other residents of the wild country.
Wapiti had once ranged over most of the North American continent. Now they're found mainly in the West. In Jasper National Park, they're doing so well, in fact, that some of them are being tranquilized and moved out to other parks.
We have to confess that at first we thought these were timber wolves, but of course they're coyotes. They're much lighter and smaller. And one of them is being disciplined, or perhaps being thrown right out of the pack. We spent several hours just following the pack along the river. Of course, they knew we were there, but like most of the animals here, they seemed to kind of accept us, from a distance perhaps. But then any kind of acceptance by a wild animal is somehow exciting.
There are many ways to celebrate winter in the Canadian wilderness. Wildlife photography is one of them, and so is this. Not too many years ago, a man would have been thought half mad to sit in the middle of the Rocky Mountains in the middle of January and restate the great white world with brush and palette. In another clearing in the forest, another Canadian art form, sometimes at its very best in this white world of solitude. Down near Banff, on the frozen waters of the Bow River, the successors to Barbara Ann and to Karen Magnuson. Children of the West, they ride the open spaces all summer long and glide over them in winter. And yet another form of gliding, the graceful art of cross-country skiing, practiced by a former Canadian downhill champion, far from the madding crowds at the bottom of the ski lifts. This is Ernie McCullough, and this is how skiing used to be when it came here from Scandinavia in the early 1900s. In those days, it was a way to get across the country, not just up and down it. And at the bottom of a hill, you did a graceful turn called a telemark. And then raced off uphill on correctly waxed skis. And finally, the champagne of winter sports. It takes special conditions to make this possible. A great sweep of lake, fast frozen, with the ice blown clear of snow. The sport itself is an old one, but the early craft were large and heavy, limited to one lake for winter. These new boats can be stacked on top of a car and moved swiftly from one lake to another. They sail in the merest hint of a breeze and cruise at 70 miles an hour when the wind is fresh. Above all, they make no noise but the rhythmic clatter of steel on ice and the sharp snap of a sail. From the shore, they look like great white birds, riding the winter winds with not a trace of carbon monoxide. The forests of northern Ontario on a day in midwinter. And John and Janet Foster, now in the company of another expert in wildlife photography, heading for a rendezvous with one of the most elusive of all the wilderness creatures. Here in the deep woods, it's cold and getting colder. Before this night is over, it will drop to 40 below. A matter of indifference to one of God's smaller creatures.
We've been followed by these little gray birds on every trip into the bush. They always come swooping in, it seems just as we're taking the food out of the pack. They picked up many names out here in the bush. One is Canada Jay, but they're far better known as Whiskey Jack. Maybe from the Indian word Wisakachak, that means thief. They're marvelously adapted to cold weather, and when it's really cold, they just fluff up their feathers. And they nest in March when the trees are still full of snow. But somehow, a campsite without Whiskey Jacks, it just wouldn't be the same place.
Bill Mason, a Canadian naturalist and filmmaker, who has probably taken more pictures of Arctic and timber wolves than any man alive, and who could spend a happy year without ever entering a heated building.
Inside the tent, after a night that went down to 40 below zero, you wake up and see your own breath hanging in frosty crystals above you.
The only thing to do when the morning is as cold as this is immediately go for a brisk walk. You have to get the blood circulating again. Yet, you know, to wake on a January morning when the sky's blue and the sun's bright, it's really a beautiful experience.
Sub-zero tenting is not for the novice, but neither is it for veterans only. Lightweight tents, down-filled parkas and sleeping bags, freeze-dried foods, and something with a bit more sizzle and flavor all combine to make this possible for anyone who is reasonably fit and possessed of a venturesome spirit. There isn't much conversation at times like this, but a great deal of communication. This is one of the moments you've been pointing toward. A rendezvous with an aircraft that will take you still deeper into the Ontario North. A remarkable aircraft, the Turbo Beaver, built specifically for the riggers of the Canadian North. It's equally adaptable to wheels, float, and skis. The mission is an official one, a survey of the wolf population in Algonquin, or more colloquially, the annual wolf count.
The best conditions for aerial tracking are a clear, cold day like this, about 24 hours after a fresh snow. And then you know that all of the wolf tracks down there are also fresh. And we saw eagles, both bald and golden. A pair of moose. They're big enough and aggressive enough to stand off wolves. Even from the air, wolves are hard to find. The average pack is about 5 wolves, and their principal prey is white-tailed deer. And of course the arguments never stop. Deer hunters look upon wolves as unfair competition. But you know, the wolf is really terrified of man. We've been close to them all over Canada, as close as 10 feet. Yet we have only a few hurried shots like these. They're just too shy and too quick. Kills are quite easy to find. Ravens, eagles, and a host of small creatures beat a path to every carcass. You know, in this way, the great timber wolf gives other creatures a bite to eat in the difficult months of winter. It's like a chain of life that depends on the wolf. Dan Strickland is the provincial park naturalist, and he knows the location and territory of every pack around here for hundreds of square miles.
We decided to stay behind. We'd seen a second kill from the air, about a half-mile away, and a golden eagle was feeding on it. The aircraft left, and they promised to come back for us in a few hours.
We simply followed the wolf tracks across the lake and through the woods. The day had warmed up to about 5 below zero. So we made a rough blind from a sleeping bag and then waited about 100 yards from the kill.
It was a long, cold wait, but we did develop a healthy respect for ravens. They have superb eyesight, and even though we were very well hidden, they could still pick up our slightest movement.
But wolves are just too smart, and you're lucky if you see them at all. A glimpse through a long lens after 5 hours can be considered success.
Late in the afternoon, the beaver returns, its own wolf count completed for the day. Half an hour later, you're back at your campsite, preparing for another evening in the wilderness. The talk now is of wolves seen and wolves remembered.
Bill Mason has often said, "To me, the timber wolf is the symbol of everything that is wild and free." And he never misses a chance to see if they'll respond to his call.
Late winter now. The snow's still deep in the bush, but the days getting longer and sun getting stronger in these final days before spring. You drive over a hill in the early morning and confront a classic Canadian portrait, the country town in winter. The town of Whitney, 150 miles west of Ottawa. And at a nearby clearing in the forest, you approach another building, itself the home of a uniquely Canadian art. This, as it happens, was where your snowshoes were made. And now one of them is broken and should be fixed by the original artisan. Snowshoes by Avery and Sons and Friends. This is an art that has changed very little since Indians learned to survive the northern winters. Perhaps it could all be speeded up and substitutes found for nature's materials. But why? The snowshoe is a highly personal thing and calls for materials that are durable but yielding, responsive to the human limb under stress.
These logs will all be snowshoes. Alvin Avery cuts them himself, looking for what he calls rim ash up on the hills. And he never cuts in a swamp. He says the wood down there is too brittle. This one log produced 22 pairs. With a certain satisfaction, Alvin remembers the people who told him he'd be out of business when snowmobiles appeared. It's been the exact opposite. He's never been so busy.
You can feel a real sense of tradition here, the handing down of skills from father to son, men working with their hands in the clutter and jumble of an old barn.
The old familiar northern stove built from a 45-gallon oil drum. There are no fancy steam gauges here, just a hole in a pipe. When the steam starts blowing out and the water stops dripping, they just hammer in a wooden plug.
The snowshoes are laced with cowhide. The strips are cut from the hide while it's still wet and smelling like nothing on earth. The early Indians probably used moose or caribou hide, but this is basically how the Indians made them. The wood bending easily after a few hours in steam or hot water, and then left in forms to dry. It takes about 10 days.
Just a few years ago, the making of snowshoes, like the making of birch bark canoes, was a rapidly declining art. Today, the demand sometimes exceeds supply. On any given day in winter, this one factory could sell 500 pair if it had them. There's another factor involved in snowshoeing, the simple matter of exercise. As the legs go, so goes the heart. Such is the dictum of one of the world's great cardiac specialists. And few sports on earth do more for the legs than snowshoeing. Exercise for the legs and for the heart, from several points of view.
There are so many ways to enjoy winter. In fact, we look forward to these moments as eagerly as to our first canoe trip of spring. Snowshoeing is really quite easy. With a good harness that's properly adjusted, you just walk normally. We find that army mucklucks with that thick duffel lining will keep your feet warm at any temperature. When you finally hit the trail, all of your senses just come alive. And after about 5 or 6 hours, your muscles begin to ache in a satisfying kind of way. Snowshoeing is really a perfect way to travel. You need no trails, and you make no sound.
I think I've come to enjoy Algonquin Park in winter almost more than in summer. There are few people here. The land is silent and still. The woods are full of animal tracks. And again, there's that expectation of seeing wildlife. And we found that we can travel on snowshoes almost as silently as in a canoe. Clothing can be a problem. You do tend to get warm. The secret is layers of light clothing that can be peeled off and stuffed into packs as the day progresses. We found the ideal temperature is about 0 or 10 below. It's really comfortable snowshoeing then, and the snow is dry and powdery.
There's one other simple joy that combines with a snowshoe trip. When it's time to take a break and satisfy a well-developed appetite, no need to seek out a hot dog stand. In a matter of minutes, you can make your own fire pit and cook with the materials provided by a benevolent nature. In winter, there is firewood at every hand, fallen limbs, dry and crisp and ready for the burning. And if you build your fire near a Laurentian shield rock face, it will not only boil water for tea, but reflect a gentle heat. This is surely one of the greatest of satisfactions, a reminder that even if the sun has gone cold, nature has not entirely abandoned man. Life will go on.
Trail skiing is another superb winter way of travel. Again, it's silent, it's physically demanding, and there are no crowds.
Then suddenly, too soon, it's over. Almost. The March sun is pouring down, and everywhere there is the sweet smell of pine and cedar and hemlock. And all around you, a new and promising sound. The sound of winter, gurgling away in the brooks of spring. You still wear a jacket, though it's hardly needed, for it's a very short wait to capture one of the most enchanting sights of the season. Breakup. It starts with 1,000 trickles far up in the hills. The trickles become rivulets. The rivulets turn to streams. And when the valleys narrow and the rocks grow high, the icy waters become raging rivers. White water country, cold, challenging, beautiful. The Canadian Shield in early spring.
No one waits for spring breakup more eagerly than the whitewater canoeists. They tackle the roughest water they can find. They use fiberglass kayaks and decked-in canoes.
When winter loosens its long grip on this part of the world, a fine madness fills the air, and men go down to the sea in bathtubs and all sorts of things. This is the annual run of the river rats, and it takes place on Ontario's Beaver River in the name of charity. All craft must be made by the men who will sail them, and the objective is simple: to keep from drowning. Also to get from up above to down below by water. How now, voyageur? We'll meet in Trois-Rivières or at the local tavern.
And then suddenly, the snow is all gone, and the country seems to be filled with the sounds and smells of spring. It's an exciting season for nature photographers and bird watchers.
In this little swamp, the western chorus frog reacts immediately to the vibration of footsteps. He stops calling. Then if you play back his call to him, it kind of gives him a sense of security and reassures him, and he begins to call again. And then, of course, you try to locate him and take his picture. The most dramatic response comes from birds. When a male bird calls, like the yellow-shafted flicker, it's establishing a territory that is off limits to others of its kind. The tape recording invades that territory and brings an immediate result. Watch closely. You'll see his head vibrating at high speed as he makes that hammering sound.
One last time into the higher north. A softness in the air now. An awareness that another fine winter has almost run its course. The times that we are living through have been labeled the age of anxiety. And some of the anxieties are real enough. But perhaps there is one basic apprehension that is needless and should be resolved. A feeling experienced by many of alienation from the natural world around us. The feeling that we no longer belong on this planet unless surrounded by all the complex apparatus of the urban community. The answer may be as simple as acquiring a few skills. The ability to move over the winter and summer landscape with one's entire world on one's back, even if only for a few days at a time. In short, the skill of the camper. It requires some physical effort, but mostly it's a matter of attitude. And when one learns to feel at home in the wild country, anxiety gives place to a feeling of competence, perhaps the only real security that modern man can know. Coming to terms with nature, learning to live with it and not against it, may be the best approach to conquering the wilderness in man's soul. Coming to feel truly at home on Earth.